Welcome, everyone. It's great to see you all here today. We already have about 500 of you joining us. Thank you so much. We're expecting about 1,000, and we're really, really excited about that. It's great to see so much interest in something that's really, really important, condo reserve funds. I know you're all here to hear about that, and we're going to get right into it very soon. For those of you who need a refresher, the CAO launched a comprehensive province-wide survey recently to all condo boards in the province, asking them to voluntarily submit their reserve funding information. Our goal is to come up with a study, and that's what we're here to discuss today. You'll hear from our experts today, who will tell you more about the study, why we're doing it, what we're hoping to achieve, why it's important for you to participate. And we're also going to spend a little bit of time telling you a little bit about the last time that we did a study like this and what we found out. But first, I wanted to kick things off with a little poll so we can get to know you a little bit better and learn more a little bit about you. We want to know if you're a condo owner or board director, where you're joining us from today, and also we're interested to find out if you've already filled out the survey. Um, and while we wait for those results to come in, maybe I can take a little bit of a step back and tell you about reserve funds. For those of you who don't know, what are reserve funds? Well, it's basically a savings account that condo corporations in Ontario are legally obligated to maintain, and that they can only use for major repairs and replacements of physical assets, things like condo windows, roof, foundation, stuff that's really important, stuff that makes sure that property values stay up, that makes sure that safety is paramount. And so, we have this consumer protection safeguard here in Ontario. We have specific timelines with which these funds must be looked into and funded. And that's what we're here today to talk about. Okay, I'm seeing lots of results coming in. Um, Perhaps if we can post the poll. Okay, amazing, really interesting. So lots of condo board directors, unsurprisingly, which is great to see because it's really important for condo board directors to decide whether they're filling out this survey, and that's really our audience today. But also really important for condo owners to understand this process and to have a conversation with their condo boards about the importance of this process. Great to also see lots of managers. Managers are the if condo boards are the brain, condo managers are the neck that turns the brain around. So it's great to see you guys here joining us. Lots of people from all over the province. Especially, I want to shout out to those who are joining us from Central Ontario and Western Ontario. We would love to have more surveys from those regions in particular. So far, we've gotten lots from there, but we want even more to make sure that we have a representative sample of everybody. Um, or along the province. And then great to see that some of you have already filled out the survey and that others are considering it or are not sure. So that's what we're here to talk about today, whether we can do it or not. And so, just to get on with the show, today you'll be hearing from CAO staff, including our Director of Policy, Pramal Bangaru, as well as our policy advisor, Angela Borton Gutierrez. And then we also have a special guest, Sally Thompson, who's a principal at Synergy Partners, joining us. So without further ado, enough from me. I'm just going to kick it off to Pramal so we can start.
Alrighty, thank you, Alex. So, Alex noted, my name is Pramal. I'm the Director of Policy Programs and Dispute Resolution with the CAO. I'm here to talk to you today mainly about the reason we're here today and kind of some things we found in our previous study, and then I'll leave it to my colleagues to take over on the rest. So, if we go to the next slide. So the reserve funds are one of the most important financial tools that condominium corporations have, as Alex was noting. They support the long-term repair and replacement of common elements, and help ensure communities remain financially stable over time. Now, every condominium corporation in Ontario relies on reserve fund planning, which means the decisions made today can and do have a significant impact on owners and communities in the future. Now, since we conducted our first reserve fund survey in 2023, the economic environment has continued to evolve. Inflation, construction costs, labor shortages, supply chain pressures, and interest rates have all affected the cost of maintaining and repairing condominium properties. Now, given these challenging conditions, we of course wanted to develop a bit of a better understanding of how condominium corporations across Ontario are adapting their reserve fund planning practices and whether current approaches continue to meet future needs. The purpose of this research is to generate practical evidence-based insights that support better decision making across Ontario. Our goal is to provide information that helps boards, condominium managers, owners, and other industry professionals make informed decisions about reserve fund management and long-term financial planning. Now, ultimately, this work will continue to contribute to a stronger understanding of reserve fund trends across Ontario and help support financial health and sustainability of condominium communities for years to come. Now, if you're still unsure about the value of this research project, don't necessarily just take it from me. Please listen to what some of the members from the condominium sector have to say about this initiative.
The data from this survey.
So of course we know that condos in Ontario must have a reserve fund. But what do we know about the state of reserve funds in Ontario? And the answer is very little.
That's why I'm
trying to encourage you to participate.
I'll be encouraging my clients.
And that's why I'm encouraging condo corporations across Ontario,
condominium corporations across Ontario to participate in the Condominium Authority of Ontario's newly launched Reserve Fund Survey.
Will help us to better understand the financial pressures that condominium corporations go through with the reserve funds.
When it comes to getting the right reserve funding support.
Okay. Alrighty. So going into the next slide, I'll talk about a little bit about our previous research that we first started in 2023, because this isn't our first time conducting this type of research. So in 2023, the CIO undertook its first province-wide research study to better understand reserve fund practices and identify areas where additional education and support may benefit the sector. The response was quite significant, with 724 condominium corporations and nearly 6,000 condo owners sharing their experiences and perspectives. The full report is publicly available on the CIO's website, so I would encourage you to go take a look if you haven't, read it already. Overall, the findings were encouraging and quite insightful. While at the same time, the research also identified opportunities to improve awareness, understanding, and transparency around reserve funds, highlighting areas where continued education and engagement can enhance consumer protection across the sector. So within this previous report that we from the study we conducted in 2023, there are a number of some key findings which which we're looking to update now, right, as part of this new initiative. So one of these key findings from the 2023 research was the forward-looking inflation rates used in reserve fund study projections. And we noted that they had, as you can see on the screen, begun to increase. Now, the interesting point here, and something we're looking at currently as part of the current research initiative, is that as the survey was conducted in the spring of 2023, and reserve fund studies are, or must be updated at least every 3 years. The result was that the data reflected reserve fund plans developed before the full impact of the significant construction cost inflation experienced between the 2021 to 2023 period had been fully incorporated or felt essentially within these reserve fund studies. So this really does create an important opportunity with our current research so by surveying the sector now, we can gain a much better understanding of how recent inflationary pressures have affected reserve fund planning, funding strategies, and financial decision making across Ontario's condominium communities. Now, going into our next slide, we can see another notable finding from the 2023 research was that nearly 2/3 of responding condominium corporations received recommendations to increase reserve fund contributions by more than 3%. So this finding suggests that many of the corporations were facing growing funding requirements, likely reflecting higher expected future costs and the need to ensure reserve funds remain adequate over the long term. So again, this is another area because obviously the recommended contribution increases are reflected or would be quite largely affected by the forward-looking inflation rate. So this is another area we want to explore through the current research to better understand how funding recommendations and contribution levels may have evolved in response to the changing economic conditions. Now, lastly, the 2020 research also found that 79% of responding condominium corporations reported making reserve fund contributions that either met or exceeded the amounts recommended in their reserve fund studies by the reserve fund study provider. Now, while this finding is interesting, it also highlights a limitation with the previous survey, which we're looking to fix with our current research initiative. The limitation here is that we did not previously ask or drill down with respondents if that 21%, so those who aren't meeting the recommendations provided by the reserve fund study provider, whether they created their own plan for future funding, right, which is allowable under the Act as long as you meet certain requirements, or if they're just simply non-compliant. So again, that's another area we're looking to drill down into as part of the current research initiative to really get a better understanding of some of these things we found in the initial research study. So like I was saying, in the current research initiative, we are looking to close this gap and develop a much better understanding in this area by asking specific questions to better understand the reasons behind some of our previous research findings. So that's it for me right now, and I believe it's going to be Angela taking you folks through our current research initiative.
Thanks, Ramal. Hi, I'm Angela. I'm a policy and program analyst here at the CAO. I will be talking about the current research that we're doing, a little bit first about why we're continuing this work. So in 2023, we did have that survey which answered some important questions and raised new ones which require more insights. Economic conditions have continued to change since then, and we've heard from the sector that reserve fund discussions are still challenging for condo communities. So we want to understand what is driving those challenges and how condo corporations are adapting. The purpose of the research is purely educational and not meant to enforce compliance. So what we hope to learn is how condo corporations are responding to these changing economic conditions, why some corporations may experience greater financial pressures than others, if there are any trends, pressure, and planning practices that are emerging across the province, and if there's any information that would help boards and owners have better conversations and make more informed decisions. So how we're actually doing the research. So every condo corporation in the province has received an invitation to participate in the survey. We estimate it will take between 45 to 60 minutes to complete, and it must be completed by a designated corporation representative that has full access permissions to the corporation's profile. This is usually a board president, a secretary, or a condo manager. Participation is completely voluntary. All the responses will be analyzed. They'll be published in an aggregate report, meaning it'll just be sector-wide trends. No individual corporations will be identified. Data privacy and security are key priorities for us during this whole process. And as a reminder, the deadline to participate is now August 28th. Okay, so a little bit on this new feature that we have for this research phase for this year. This is new. We have a document sharing opportunity. So participants do have the option to complete the survey, and they also have the option to upload key financial documents. You can do this instead of the survey or in addition to the survey. So this is a key part of the research. It's going to help us move beyond the survey responses to better understand reserve fund planning practices across the sector. We consulted with different reserve fund experts to arrive at these documents that would be best to collect to gather meaningful data. So what we are collecting are notices of future funding, so from your 2 most recent reserve fund studies, and this is for every reserve fund your corporation contributes to, including for any shared facilities reserve funds. We're also collecting audited financial statements from the past 5 fiscal years, again, including for any shared facilities that have separate financial statements, and any share facilities agreements if your corporation has them. If you only have some of these documents and not all of them, you're welcome to upload what you have or what you feel comfortable sharing. Okay. So we are partnering with experts on this research approach. We have a partnership with TMU, specifically the Urban Analytics Institute at Toronto Metropolitan University. They helped us design the survey, and they will also be helping us to analyze and prepare the final report on the findings. So this ensures a strong evidence-based approach. Participating corporations will be asked for consent to share their data with TMU for analysis and reporting. If your corporation does not want to consent, you can still participate. You will just have to acknowledge that your data will be analyzed by CEO only. In terms of the actual survey and research approach development and refinement, we established our Reserve Fund Expert Working Group. They helped us to refine the survey and research approach. We also conducted thorough user testing and feedback sessions with condo community members and key stakeholders, and this is to ensure that we're asking the right questions and collecting meaningful information. Okay, so if you would like to participate, you're excited to get on board, here are the next steps. Number 1, talk to your board. Decide if your corporation actually wants to take part in the survey, upload documents, or both. Please keep in mind that only 1 survey response will be accepted for each condo corporation, so make sure to choose 1 person to participate on behalf of your corporation. Make sure that that person has full access permissions so that they can actually log in to the corporation's CAO profile. And again, for example, this could be a board president, a secretary, or a condo manager. If you're the one participating on behalf of your condo corporation, you'll have to log into your account on the CAO's website, navigate to corporation surveys, select your condo corporation, and then at that way you will be able to access your corporation's unique survey invitation, secure document upload function, and instructions. I will be doing a quick demo to show you how you can access the portal through the CAO's website. Okay, so this is the CAO's website. In order to access the portal, you will have to click on the right-hand side here where it says CAO portal. And you'll have to enter your login credentials, username and password, and then click login. Here you will be able to access the corporation surveys portal. And you'll have to select your condo corporation. Again, it'll have to be a corporation for which you have full access permissions. If you only have read-only permissions, somebody else in your corporation will have to participate on behalf of the corporation. Okay. So in the portal itself, you will see there's 2 sections. There's a survey section, a document section. If you would like to participate in the survey, you'll have to select complete survey here. And you will see the survey come up. There's some upfront information here, most of which we're discussing today. And you will see the survey questions pop up. There's also a Reserve Fund research guide that you can access through here, which has additional instructions. And if you would like to complete the survey in French, you can select this arrow here and change your language preference. In terms of the document upload, there's some information here on how your documents will be used. Please upload documents in this format, document type, fiscal year. This is just to help us with our review. You can select add files, choose files, select your file, and you will see it listed here on the portal. You can also delete it if you would like to by selecting the trash can here. Once that's uploaded, you will need to provide consent for how the extracted data from your documents will be analyzed. So if you select yes here, that means you consent to us extracting the data from your documents and sharing it with TMU just for analysis and reporting. It's a very secure process, but if you would still like to not consent, that's okay. You can select no. then confirm that the data will only be analyzed by CAO, then select submit. And you will see that a successful process right there. And that's it. I will pass it on now to Sally to talk about the benefits for the condo sector.
Thanks, Angela. Interesting stuff. I know when we were looking at the survey results back in 2023, it was a really frustrating time because we had just come through COVID and the high inflation rate that hit us in 21, 22, and 23. And so the survey, when it came out, was not really representative of the reality on the ground anymore already. So I'm very interested to see how, that high inflation in 21, 22, 23 obviously has made, I think Angela, was it Pramal said something like, what percentage of increases were more than 3%. And I'm sure many of you directors in the last 3 years have seen increases much higher than 3%. So 3% will sound like the good old days. Unfortunately, some, inflation rates are down now, but some particular project costs are still inflating significantly. So the rough road is not over yet, unfortunately. As most of you directors know, the reserve fund contribution is a very significant percentage of the fees that owners pay. For high rises over, say, 30 years old, it's probably about 40% of the fee on average. And for townhouses, probably closer to 45%. So this is a really significant part of the cost of living in a condo. As a result, there's always going to be pressure on directors to keep reserve fund contributions down, but we also know that a properly funded reserve fund is absolutely essential to financial and physical success of a condo in the long term. I mean, upkeep of that building. The goal, obviously, with reserve funding is to strike the right balance. We need homes to be as affordable as is realistic currently, but we also need to make sure that condominiums have adequate funding so they can be properly maintained and remain a viable source of quality homes, in the long term. This is why I think it's really important for the CAO to routinely complete surveys of reserve funds across the province. Analyzing reserve fund data is inherently difficult due to the 3-year update cycle. At any particular building, you might currently have a study that was just completed, in which case the next 3 years are set out in that notice, or you might be just about to get a new study. And so the data that they're going to receive from that older notice is different. So it's not really apples to apples. And as a result, they're going to need a lot of data points in order to be able to draw conclusions from the data. It's really important that the CAO hear from condos all across the province and condos of all different ages and types. We need the 60-story tower in Toronto, but we also need the 6-story townhouse unit in London, or condo, in London. We want, if we want to get a useful report from the CAO, we need to give them lots of data. We need some standard condos, some vacant land, and some common element condos as well. Good quality information, if we get good quality information into CAO, they'll be able to assemble it into something that's going to help CAO going forward, obviously. It'll enable them to tailor their services to help fill information gaps, help them understand better what the situation condos are facing, and enable them to support change where change is needed. Next slide, thank you. With respect to reserve fund practices, we live in a very strange situation in Ontario. I honestly believe we have the best reserve fund legislation in the world. However, we have one single fundamental problem that's sabotaging the whole thing, and that is that the first-year reserve contributions are too low, probably without exception, certainly in my 36 years of doing reserve fund studies, without exception. This puts all early boards, and when I say early, I mean up to when a building's about 25 years old, in the really difficult position of having to increase contributions significantly at every update. Generally, and to try and avoid big increases, it generally pushes them to use long phase-in periods and short report terms. These approaches may reduce contributions to the fund for early owners, but they increase them for owners who live in the building when it's older. I'm very hopeful that this data will help highlight these issues now, but in addition, it will certainly serve as good baseline data. In the future, as CAO does further surveys, which we hope they will, we may be able to evaluate where condos started and what the future held from them to help sort of educate the system overall. Of course, my plan for the future surveys is not what's in the current survey, so I'm not making any promises for CAO, but I am a reserve fund planner, so it's my job to think in the long run. For the boards, I really hope that the report that comes out of the survey will provide value to you. Obviously the CAO is asking for an hour of your effort, so they want to give something back. We're really hopeful that the report will be used by you guys to share with your community, to provide benchmarks that the directors can use and refer to, and even to help owners better understand reserve fund practices, and more importantly, that their condominium is not the only one facing challenges. I believe there is real value in collecting wide-ranging and accurate baseline data for reserve funds in the province. We have, as Angela said, we have simplified the process. If any of you submitted last time, you're going to remember that it was an exercise in cherry picking data points off the various forms, which was a little bit fraught with risk that people might put the wrong data in. I do encourage people to upload the documents this time and leave the data extraction to CAO and TMU, because I think that will really improve the data quality, and it will, quite frankly, allow them to gather more data than they could do last time. So I'm very, very hopeful that everybody in attendance here today will get their own corporation signed up, and ideally encourage a friend in another condo to also send in their data. And I think I will hand that back now to Alex for Q&A. Is that fair?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thanks so much. We have lots to go through, lots of really great questions, and we've put aside lots of time for it. And we're really looking forward to getting into it. And please keep the questions coming. I see them in the Q&A, and I've marked a bunch of them for answering. We're getting this one a lot, so I just want to address it live as well. Will the presentation be sent to us after the session? The CAO, we will post the recording of this webinar on our website, as well as on our YouTube channel, and I've shared the link to our YouTube channel. We will also post the slides in PDF form on our website as well. Okay, so maybe a question for Pramal. Who was the survey mailed to? Was it the property manager, president of the board, or others?
Well, interesting answer is technically it was all the ones you noted. So the approach that we took was we didn't physically mail out anything. We used digital first organization, so we used digital channels to issue the call for the surveys. So we took the contacts for every corporation. So that would be the board of directors, the managers, and anyone listed as an other representative on a corporation profile in our system. We sent out an e-blast talking about the survey, and a lot about what we've spoken about here, right, to encourage them to participate.
Thanks so much, Pramal. Okay, we have an interesting comment from Joseph Defoe. So Joseph says, as a condominium board member for close to 30 years, I find consistently that estimates and reserve funds for replacements of components are lower and sometimes significantly lower than actual costs of those replacements. The condominium corporation is always playing catch up. This is not a sustainable situation. And I wanted to highlight that comment, Joseph, because that is actually precisely the reason why this feeling, this sort of idea out there in the sector that condo board members have and owners have that they're playing catch up is precisely the reason why we've undertaken this project. We want to address this with some actual hard data, with some numbers, and we want to understand how deep the problem goes. And so, thank you for that comment because that's something that we're watching very closely.
Alex, can I jump in on that one just for a second?
Mhm.
I was going to say, I think I would like to sort of reassure all directors that there are two different things that can kind of go wrong on a reserve fund. One is that inflation is more than was predicted in that study, which has certainly been the case for 21, 22, and 23. And don't forget that that's still, depending on when your update was done, that may still not have fully flowed through. And so that will certainly result in underestimated budgets. That hopefully will stop happening now that inflation has stabilized. But when a study is written with 3% inflation assumption and inflation is actually 20%, then obviously your budgets are going to be low. But the other thing is it's just pure effort. It's really hard work to budget all the reserve fund projects in a reserve fund study. And so the quality is really a function of the provider.
Thanks so much, Sally. It's a great point. Okay, moving right along, we have a question from Neil. He says, will the data and results shared from the updated survey be segmented by characteristics like reserve fund practices, type and size of the condo corporation? And Neil says this could make the survey useful to boards. So maybe Parmal, you can take a stab at this one.
Yeah, I can answer it, and then I can also, ask Angela if she has any kind of follow up on this as well. So the answer is yes, of course, we'll be segmenting the analysis based on a number of different corporation attributes, including type, location, size, right? Age, right? A number of different attributes. So because we do have in addition to the survey data, we do have a lot of returns data that we can cross-reference this data with. So there's a lot of great things that we can do with this data if we get it, kind of thing. So again, the more we get, the more interesting things we'll be able to do and add even more value to the sector with this type of reporting. Angela, I don't know if you had anything to add to that, and then Sally as well.
Sure. I mean, the survey was designed with all types of condo corporations in mind. There are specific questions to address different types. So, of course, we want to capture that data. It's important for us to have a representative sample. So thank you. Thank you for everyone who has participated. And if you haven't yet, your participation will help us to ensure we have meaningful data for every different type of condo corporation. Thank you.
Great.
Is it fair to say last time, guys, that you were a little short of data in some categories? I seem to remember there being a few where we couldn't answer certain questions because we just didn't have the data. So that's why it's like really important. Like
Yes.
There's so many variables in condo that we need as much data as we can get our hands on.
Yeah, and then without enough data, it can be really hard to make sense of certain data as well. You don't know if it's just an anomaly or an actual trend kind of thing. So it is very much just a case of the more the better, really, kind of thing. So.
Thanks very much, everyone. So next we have a question from Vera. Vera asks, what would you recommend condo owners do if the reserve fund is consistently lower than where it should be and is being flagged by the auditors? Calling a special meeting, she says, can be tricky. Sometimes condo owners are unable to contribute in these meetings. Considering there's no provision in the Condo Act for condo owners to ask the corporation to have an in-person mandatory or hybrid meeting, what do you suggest? How do we tackle the situation? So this is a big governance question, and I think we all will have a little bit to contribute here. Maybe I'll take a first stab at it, and I'll just say that it's important, Vera, to always ask the question whether or not other owners in the community feel the same as you do. Condos in Ontario are meant to be little democracies, and oftentimes we forget that. And so, as a first step, I always think, am I the only one who feels this way, or does everybody else also feel this way? And then, what can we do when we come together to make that better? And then, if you have a disagreement with your board on the reserve strategy or something else, always bring that up constructively and try to work with them in a constructive way. There are some fail safes for you. Like you can call an owners meeting, and if you remain unsatisfied with how that goes, because of maybe it was a process issue or something else, I should flag that changes are coming to Ontario condo law when it comes to owners meetings. Because as of July 1st of next year, you'll be able to actually file a CAT case if you feel that the process was not right or you were not given enough information. So a number of areas where you can go there. Parmal, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, I think those are all, valid points, Alex. So I think you covered it quite well. The key for a lot of the time is just, open communication, kind of understanding. Right now, if it is something that is being flagged in the auditor's report, again, it is something you could consider looking to requisition a meeting on. Now, of course, like Alex said, you'd need to get a sense of others in the corporation in your community that are willing to sign the requisition with you, because of course you need the 15% of the voting units to sign. Right. But again, my key and the one thing I always kind of convey to folks is that the clear need to communicate and really kind of get a mutual understanding and kind of open discussion on things of these on these types of matters. Angela, Sally, I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind jumping in for a second because it is unusual. Like if I hear someone say that an auditor is flagging something being low, where I want to go with this is when directors are looking, or more owners, when owners are looking at reserve funds, they sometimes get confused if the balance is lower than what's shown in the study. And I always try to get them to focus on the contribution. So in other words, if we do a study every 3 years, we say you're to contribute X, Y, and Z, you want to see that corporation contributing X, Y, and Z. Sometimes the spending will be slightly different. Something comes up that wasn't planned, something gets done a year sooner, and those balances can be off what is planned. But you don't need to worry about that. What you need to worry about is the contribution being offside from the notice. So if it's a matter of balances being low, I'd be surprised that an auditor would flag that, but it's possible. It's more likely that they're flagging a corporation that's not following the notice. And so that's really the question you're asking, is why are we not contributing according to the notice of future funding?
Thank you. I just want to highlight the value of our website. We do have guided steps for common issues. The recommendation is always to communicate, send letters to your board before escalating further. That's it.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone. Okay, moving right along. We got lots to get through. Mark Ho asks, are there distinctions being made in the survey between standard and common element corporations? Parmal or Angela, maybe?
Yeah, I can let Angela take this one. Angela?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah. Are there distinctions being made between standard and common element corporations in the survey?
Yes, there are specific questions. We understand common elements typically don't have units. They're more likely to have bottles, parcels of tied land, and we are collecting more instead of unit descriptions and unit information, we are collecting information on bottles. That's an example of how common elements corporations are being incorporated into the survey itself. So there are specific questions designed, and the report will segment by different types as well.
Yeah, and just one other thing, the important thing is that there are different questions, and the survey does have logic within it to surface differently worded questions to account for the different types of corporations in Ontario.
And some of the folks, some of you who are living in some of these, there's some very complex condos right now where we have a common element condo sitting inside a vacant land or a vacant, there's some real combinations. And so you're going to have to coordinate as to who is responding on behalf of which corporation, even though you may pay fees to more than one corporation as well.
Thanks very much, everyone. Okay, next question is from Robert Purcell. And just bear with me, Robert, while I try to untangle it. So Robert is asking, you raised challenges with reserve funds while at the same time highlighting how important they are. Are you able to comment on what a condo corporation should do if it finds itself with unexpected capital repair costs more than it reserved in year one? Should it adjust its cash flow contribution levels for year 2 and 3 and then onward with the new reserve fund? I'm going to lob this one to Sally, perhaps.
Yeah, I always say, there is some, that answer can be different in different circumstances. So it's about by how much and relative to what. So in other words, obviously, if you need to spend more money than you have in your balance in year one, then you have a problem, Houston. So you're going to need to deal with that, right? That's going to need a special assessment or something else to cover that difference. If you just spent more than was planned, but you have a good balance, then you're fine to wait for the next update. So I always say, if there's any question, it's really a matter of cash flow. Can you get through to the next update? If there's any question, your reserve fund provider should be able to kind of quickly pull up the model for your building, model the changes to the data, and check if you need to, and give you advice specifically whether or not you need to go in and do a new update to reflect the current situation.
Great, thanks very much. A question from Mesar. What is the deadline for participation in the survey? That's a pretty easy one. It's August 28th. And so remember that date, please, August 28th. We look forward to all your responses. Question from Heather Graham. Is it likely that a non-compliant corporation simply won't participate to avoid detection of not properly funding the reserve? This would alter the data and percentages. Is there a plan to monitor compliance with actually funding reserves? I'm going to take a first stab at this and I'm going to pass it on to you guys. So, Heather, that's an excellent question. Thank you so much for asking that. It is possible that some condo corporations will feel that they shouldn't share this data with the CAO because they're not proud of their reserve situation. And I want to reiterate, as we did earlier in the presentation, that this is not a compliance exercise for us. We're trying to find out what the situation is so that we can be more helpful to the sector. And the first step of doing that is getting better data. And so whatever your reserve fund situation is, we encourage you to participate. And then in terms of what can happen for monitoring compliance, that's a conversation that has to happen after we have that data, depending on the situation of that data. And I'll let anybody else jump in.
Sorry, Alex, that sounded like with respect to compliance, it's going to depend on the situation. You're not going to, CAO is not going to chase down that condo because they're not compliant.
No,
Is
that's
really important, right? Because
Mhm.
it actually is way more valuable if the condos with the biggest struggles make
Mhm.
sure that they're represented in this data set, because that is going to give much more information than if only the condos who are just in, everything is dandy and life is good. If only they submit, then there's going to be a really false picture go to CAO and eventually to the government, and that doesn't help the sector. So don't be embarrassed. If you think your condo is the worst mess in the world, trust me, it's not. There are lots of other condos struggling. So share your data, because that's really going to be actually more helpful to CAO.
Yeah, and just to build on that, the real focus of this is to really understand and get more insight into the state of reserve funds in the sector, and just to kind of help put some more minds at ease, as well as any data that, say, the TMU folks are analyzing will be completely anonymized. All reporting will be done in aggregate, so there's going to be no identification, obviously, of any corporation in particular. So if you do have concerns about filling out the survey, providing documentation just based on solely on the state of the reserve fund, I hope at least, we've done a little bit tonight to help alleviate some of those concerns. And I can, give you, I can assure you that there will be no kind of any compliance related activities related to the data we receive.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much. Next question is from Carol Alexander. She asks, what percentage of condo corporations are currently underfunded relative to the Reserve Fund study recommendation based on the 2023 report? And I believe, Pramal, that number was 8 out of or 2 out of 10 from our 2023 report.
Wasn't it that 2 out of 10 said they weren't funding according to something, to the Reserve Fund study recommendations? I'm not sure that doesn't necessarily mean that they were underfunded.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a good point, Sally. So that particular finding was specifically related to whether or not they were meeting or exceeding the reserve fund study providers' recommendations. However, as I noted in the presentation, there's a lot to unpack from that, which we're trying to do with the current survey. Now, we got a little bit of a glimpse into funding levels from the 2023 survey. However, to be able to, and again, you're probably hearing this term, representative sample kind of being thrown around currently. So in our previous survey, we weren't able to get a representative sample. We did get a pretty good response rate from the sector. However, there was some issues with the sample regarding its representativeness of the sector, kind of thing. So we did gather some insight into the current state of reserve funds in Ontario, but the actual to say which ones are funded or are properly funded and which ones aren't, isn't something we could necessarily glean from that original 2023 research project, kind of thing, because also considering when we often think of this term adequacy, there's a ton to unpack there, right? There's the, implications of course, the reserve fund study. There's, did the reserve fund study consider everything? Were there certain components that may have been missed? That type of stuff, right? Kind of thing, were the, inflation rates reasonable? There's any number of questions here. So that's not necessarily a question we look to provide too much clarity on or make definitive statements in that nature. But again, in this round of the survey, we're definitely looking to delve into things much more. And we're hoping to be able to make more generalizable findings based on getting, again, that representative sample.
Yeah, I think last time that 20% was a bit of a shocker, because we really didn't know whether it meant people were properly doing a board funding plan that differed from the reserve fund, or if they were ignoring the whole process. And so this time we'll be able to dive into that for sure. And I think the other thing I would say to all the directors out there is that if you feel like your condo is the only one that is currently underfunded and facing huge increases, you are absolutely not alone. Like, this inflation that hit us is still working its way through the studies today. So it's very, very common still at the updates that are being done now to have 25 and 30% increases to the contribution required. And that's very painful to face, because your last study will have had huge increases as well. but it's just the nature of the beast. And so, the 3% number from last time was in a different time. This is now a new time, and the data will show that. But it doesn't, so it's underfunding is a kind of a weird expression, right? Are you not putting in the amount that the reserve fund study called for, or are you just finding yourself short of money relative to the projects? Those are all totally different circumstances that hopefully the data will help, shed some light on.
Yeah, and maybe we can delve into that question about adequacy a little bit more because the next question from Vito is exactly about that. So, has any consideration been given to develop a rule of thumb to determine adequacy of reserve funds? I know you're laughing, Sally, at this one. Most accountants, lawyers, managers, and owners don't know how to determine if the reserve fund is adequate. So, I know, Sally, you have strong opinions on this. I'll let you kind of tackle it first.
Well, I'll be gentle on it. I mean, I'm currently sitting on a committee called the Committee to Save Condos, which is actually digging right into this issue, which is to kind of look at what do we do to make sure that we are adequately funding. And like I said in my preamble, this world would be a perfect world in our condo world if we had those first year reserve contributions right. But if we don't, we're starting every condo on its heels, and getting them to the right place is just so challenging. And so we do need to get better at defining adequate. We need to figure out what term do we need to be looking at, what phase-in periods are reasonable to not penalize future owners too much. But it's not a one-size-fits-all. It totally depends. If you're 40 years old, you've lived in one paradigm. You didn't have to be adequately funded until 2019. If you were built since 2001, you should have been adequately funded. If you're, so each condo's circumstances are different.
Absolutely. Next question is from Paul Brennan. Are you considering new potential costs related to the likely effects of climate change, such as floods, fire, storms, the possibility for condos to be using new types of technologies such as EV chargers, heat pumps? Looking forward to your answer. So I know, Sally, there's a lot of work that goes on in the field around climate change, and maybe I'll let you have a first go at it.
Yeah, it's kind of a tricky issue, guys, because what we can do, there's some interesting stuff. I'll put a pitch in here for Toronto Atmospheric Fund has a climate initiative where they're helping to fund some decarbonization studies. So if you're interested, reach out to them for sure. But also what's interesting on the reserve perspective is that we don't want condos to go out and spend the money that they have saved up for their roofs and their boilers and their carpets on a climate project that wasn't planned, right? Because otherwise we put them into a real problem going forward. So that's one thing. And then the Condo Act restricts us from paying for anything that's an improvement, an additional alteration or improvement from reserve funds. And so you have to kind of look at each improvement project and decide, is this a repair and replace or major repair or replacement of an existing common element or asset, or is it an additional alteration or improvement? If it's an additional alteration or improvement, then you can't dig into the reserve fund for that. So what does that mean? So it means today, if you have atmospheric boilers and you're going to replace with condensing boilers, we have to answer the question, is a condensing boiler a current construction standard? The answer is yes. That's the only boiler you can buy today. So reserve eligible. However, if you wanted to take your gas-fired makeup air unit and put in an electric air source heat pump, that would not, I don't believe yet, be considered current construction standard. So the incremental cost of that improvement would not only not be reserve eligible, but may actually need approval of the owners. So it's a very difficult answer. I wish, there's a lot of people who wish we could just dig into the reserve fund to decarbonize buildings, but we have to be very careful because those reserve funds are already pretty precarious. And so it's like we have to kind of move forward step at a time, as the construction standards change. And then the reserve fund studies will start to plan for those alternate equipments, and then we will be able to implement them. But we can't get ahead of ourselves. Even EV chargers, one of the things Paul mentioned there was EV chargers. Those, I do not believe the first installation of those is reserve eligible either, because they're clearly not a repair or replacement of a common element. They're a new component, and the changes that were made by the government to around EV did not say, and by the way, these are reserve eligible. So generally speaking, those do not get paid for from reserve currently. Obviously, if you have them put into your building when your building is new, then you can replace them. Or if you install them, then future replacement would be reserve eligible.
Thanks, Ali. That actually dovetails really nicely into the next question, which is about the eligibility from Joseph. This question is about what is allowed to be in a reserve fund. Why does a new major item that needs to be installed, why is that not allowed, but an upgrade to that same item is allowed. So I'll just open it up a little bit and then folks can go. This reserve fund condo act approach is really about safety and consumer protection. So it's about, major repairs and replacements to existing items to avoid situations where a board may decide that, a renovation should be used out of the reserve fund. But then when an emergency comes up, there is no more money in the reserve fund. So it's important to think to remember that it's about major repairs and replacements of common elements and assets. And that can become a safety issue. So that's the reason why. And I'll open it up to others as well.
Well, I think when it comes to improvements or upgrades, Section 97 of the Act gives the board very clear instructions about when they need to notify the owners and when they need to get approval of the owners. So, the board has full discretion to spend from the reserve fund, and that is because it's for repair and replacement of the common elements. They do not have full discretion to buy improvements or upgrades. That you have to turn to the owners either notify the owners and allow them to requisition a meeting, or in some circumstances, depending on the cost, you do have to get approval from the owners. So it's definitely a measure that's put in there to make sure we don't erode reserve funds on pet projects, quite frankly. Yeah.
Great point. Next question is from Naren. They ask, does the CAO get involved in reserve fund spending to ensure that condo boards are compliant with the Condominium Act? Example, decisions that are being made by the majority of the board versus one rogue board member. We've touched on this a little bit, but maybe I'll let Pramal kind of take another stab at it.
Yes. Well, the answer to that is no. The CIO does not get involved into, like, say, the inner workings of individual corporations. Our mandates, our consumer protection mandate, does very much fall to education, information, right? Doing, research, like the type of research we're doing now. So corporations, communities can make more informed decisions, right? So boards can have a better understanding of what they need to be doing. Owners can have a better understanding of what, a well-funded reserve fund looks like, some trends across the sector, that type of thing. But we do not get involved, particularly for reserve funds, into the inner workings of condo corporations in Ontario.
Great. Thanks, Pramal. So next question is from Richard Shapiro. When the research is done, will CAO produce any RFS guidance? Clarity is needed regarding exactly what types of costs belong in the RFS. So I think the question is, what are we hoping to get out of this research project? Maybe Pramal, you can take that one as well.
Oh, yeah, sounds good. So what we're looking to get really is, I kind of touched upon it before. What we're looking at is to get again, a representative sample so we can make generalizable findings across the sector. We're hoping to be able to give folks in the condominium sector more data, benchmarking data, trends across the sector. For instance, the average fee increase, what we're seeing across standard condominium corporations compared to common elements or vacant lands, right? Being able to give corporations of all different sizes and locations different information based on those attributes, right? So it's very much again, an information and like we're gathering this information to better understand, so then we can better inform and educate as well, right? So depending on what we get and the insights we're able to develop out of this, will probably continue to evolve. But those would be some very initial kind of, I think, goals we're looking to get out of this, and really mainly start to see as, where are we, but more importantly, kind of where are we heading in the future as well, if we continue kind of on this path, or like on this kind of current trajectory as well. Angela, Sally, if you
Well,
want to.
Permel, what I was going to say is, I think the question was sort of specifically about guidance on what can be paid from reserve fund. And I was going to suggest that don't you have a guideline written already for reserve funds that might help in that regard?
We do, yeah. We have a CAO guide on condo reserve funds that's available.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that might help. And then obviously, if you're there are a lot of things are basic, right? Is it the major repair and replacement of a common element? Where it gets fuzzy is maintenance versus reserve? Do you know, if I clean my makeup air stacks, is that reserve eligible? Just because it's expensive doesn't make it reserve eligible, so no. And then sometimes it's about boundaries. We need to replace the roof on this terrace. Who pays for the finishes? Who pays for the waterproofing? How is this project split with the owners? So in those cases, you're getting into very specifics to your corporation. And on the kind of spending threshold, that's going to be a board policy issue. On the who pays the owner versus the corporation, you're probably heading to your lawyer to get help on that, or sometimes your reserve fund provider might be able to help depending on the circumstances.
Yep, thanks very much. Next question is from Barbara Gao. How do you know if you've hired a good engineer? How do you hire a good one? I know you're laughing, Sally, so I'll let you take that one. Sally, you're on mute.
There we go. It's like a video game. I'm going to give the same answer. CAO has a terrific guideline that you can refer to. How's that?
Yeah, I don't know, Angela, do you want to answer this one? About the some of what we have in the our reserve fund guide to help folks with getting the right RFS provider?
Yeah, there is information there to help you navigate. The most important thing is being able to collaborate with your reserve fund study provider, ensuring all your documents are up to date. I think that will definitely be an important part of the process as well. Yeah, there are further details in the guide there on what types of reserve fund study providers are legally required under the Condo Act.
Yeah, and it also provides a number of best practices that you board members, managers can kind of take away to really understand what part you play in the reserve fund study process and how you can really facilitate better reserve funds, making sure you have your document, like all your documentation together, your understanding how you can get involved in the reserve fund study process and not be external to it. Different things you can look to have your reserve fund study provider employ to get better better assessments, including conditional assessments, right? Maybe destructive testing, what have you, like those types of things. So again, I'd very much encourage you folks to take a look at that guide if you haven't done so already, to take a look at some of those best practices, which can very much help with you understanding your role in that reserve fund study process.
Yeah, and I think I would just add on one thing that obviously, when I talked about how the reserve contribution is like 40 or 50% of your fee, obviously doing the math, like the reserve fund study is the single most important document that any corporation ever gets because it sets you up either for success or for failure. And so it is not the place to save a buck, right? So, invest your money wisely, ask good questions of the providers when you're interviewing. Do they have a peer review process in-house? What degree of care are they taking in preparing that study? Because it's the most important thing that a board does, as far as I'm concerned, is getting a good study.
Thanks so much, everyone. Great stuff. Okay, we'll do a few more. So next one is from John Lilico. Does the CAO plan to interfere with reserve fund study engineers? I'm confident our best approach going forward is to follow the engineers' reports and recommendations. We agree. So just to be very clear about that, the reason we're here today is not to disagree with the engineers or do their job. Sally's an engineer; she's joined us. This really is about improving the conversations that you as a board have with that engineer, informing you as a sector and the owners in your communities of what it takes to build a solid and adequate reserve fund. And so very much our hope in getting this data and publishing a study is to educate you guys about what's required and what other people are doing, and then make those conversations, elevate those conversations a little bit. Oftentimes when it comes to money, these conversations can get challenging, sometimes emotional, but the way we take the sting out of them is by having strong data and comparables. Feel free, anybody, to jump in on that.
No, I thought that was very well said.
We have lots more questions and we're kind of running out of time. Okay, a great question from Murray Stewart. A key attribute to a good reserve fund is to prevent a special assessment. How common are special assessments in Ontario? Pramal?
Thank you. Well, I guess what I can leverage is the actual sector-wide prevalence of them is data we don't necessarily have. It was a question in the previous 2023 survey. It is a question in the current survey as well, kind of thing, because it is important to understand how these reserve funds are being funded, whether it be through special assessments or loans. Angela, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was 16, so 16% of respondents that had issued a special assessment in the previous 5 years.
Yeah, it was 16% for a special assessment between 2018 and 2023, and then 3% for loans between 2018 and 2023. But it's not a representative sample. That's just among the respondents for our survey.
They're just among the respondent corporations, kind of thing. So, and again, these funding strategies are very they're of interest to us, particularly with some things we've heard anecdotally about some corporations in the sector leveraging loans more than maybe they previously had. So again, that's an area where we're really trying to delve into as part of this current study to get a lot more insight into those funding strategies. So then again, we can provide this type of information to you folks so that you can use it in your conversations within your communities.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think you're going to find that the incidence of special assessments has increased over the last 3 years relatively, but hopefully that will start to ease off as the inflation stops hitting so hard. There was a lot of buildings who went into, let's say you were planning to replace your windows in 2023, and then you got your next update and suddenly the price of those windows has almost doubled, since your last update. Well, you don't have the money. And so you are stuck, right? Do we now save up for another 10 years or do we special assess? So this recent inflation has been very, very tough on some condos. And I think I feel like the best thing CAO can do is the survey, right? Obviously, let's find out how many condos are facing it. And then the next best thing after that is let's try and, as an industry, figure out what we're going to do to prevent this. I have some great ideas about how we could prevent it, but it's been a long slog to try and get any of it implemented. So, and hopefully the data will help support decision making there.
Thanks so much. So we got a couple of great questions coming up. First one is from Deborah. She asks, any suggestions on how to deal with apathy of condo owners, especially when we are attempting to revise core documents? Okay, that's a great question, Deborah. Thank you. Sometimes we have a few best practices that we share here at the CAO with boards trying to do stuff like this. And a lot of it centers around transparency and communication style. A lot of owners may not respond really well to condo forms, just getting a condo form. So it's helpful to provide context for what you're trying to do and reasoning and explain that in clear and simple terms. There are other ways to try to engage them as well with announcements or you trying several meetings. But really the main thing is just plainly trying to explain what you're trying to do and getting owners involved in board committees, for example, or in community events so that you can start a dialogue rather than just sort of hitting them with a notice and then trying to make the thing happen. I'll open that up for others as well.
I was going to say, I would love for condos to be what condos should be, which is communities, and my mother-in-law lived in a condo up in Aurelia, and kudos to this condo. Everybody knew everybody. And they could have changed the declaration any Friday night at the potluck because they had a potluck every Friday night. And obviously that's not going to work in a 600 unit building, but I do think that community can't be built just when the board needs the owners to participate. Community has to be built throughout the year, through engagement, making residents feel like it's their home, that they're happy to be there, they want to contribute. One of my favorite condos has a sign over their garage, right by their garage door, that says "Welcome Home." And I say to the board in that building, that is the smartest move I've ever seen in a condo because it creates an obligation on that board to make those people feel welcome when they come home. And if you do that, if you make people feel like it's their home and they care about the other people in the building, they're much more likely to show up at that meeting or participate when you call on them. But I think a lot of people don't communicate, and then they're mad when nobody answers the one critical communication that goes out in the building. So
great points. Thanks so much. Okay, next one from Joanne. How should our board handle owners who do not want any increases in condo fees? That's another really great question, and definitely a challenge that a lot of condo communities face. This, I think, dovetails nicely with what we were saying before about creating that community and creating that space for dialogue and creating and starting that dialogue so that owners aren't blindsided by what you're asking, but understand the necessity. And actually, a big reason why we're taking the study on is again to open up an opportunity for that conversation to happen through this data. Um, and so, yeah, it really does boil back down to create being neighborly and being transparent and communicating often, and opening up those avenues for that consensus. Uh, does anybody else want to have
I was
anything
going
to
to say, and I
add?
think you want to give people as much warning as you can about fee increases. I think a lot of times things are done very last minute, and then people are surprised when owners are angry that it's like tomorrow. There's some notice periods in the act that are there for a good reason. It's to give people notice. But I always say if you can give more, especially for something like a special assessment. But even fee increases, I feel a lot of compassion right now for the folks who bought new condos in 2020 and are moving in today. To me, those people, they've taken a huge loss already. They're maybe underwater on their cash flow. So they're going to be much more reactive when it comes to fee increases. So those boards, you have to understand the situation that people are in and be compassionate. Some people, I see people in owners meetings sort of regularly on the edge of panic because I can tell that they're stuck. They can't sell their unit. They can't afford their unit. They don't know how they're going to pay their fees. And so any increase is going to set them off. And I would certainly not treat them as, being ignorant or uninformed. I would, you do need to be compassionate and understand that they are often facing a pretty serious financial pickle. So.
Mm. Yeah, I would just echo what Alexandra and Sally said. When it comes to communication, early and often is typically what I tell folks, or kind of communicate, right? And I do really do genuinely believe, like Alex said, this is a major value area for the type of survey we're doing, to help communities in the condo sector have these conversations, but have more informed conversations with data, right? So this is again very much an area where a report of this nature could really assist directors and owners and communities with having these kind of discussions.
I think it's also important to remind owners about the value of our reserve fund. At the end of the day, a healthy reserve fund is there to ensure the safety, the security of residents. It's important for owners' investments, the resale value of their unit. And there is a collective responsibility among owners to ensure there is a healthy reserve fund. It benefits them as well.
Thanks so much, everyone. Okay, with that, I think we can begin to conclude. There's one final small thing that I ask of everybody who's here today. If you could please vote. We're going to put another poll up on the screen just now. Just let us know how you enjoyed this webinar. We certainly loved speaking with you and getting all your great questions. This was really, really energizing and lovely to hear from all of you. I do hope we've convinced you guys to talk to your communities, talk to your boards, and fill out the survey and share this information with us. And we hope to see you very soon. And we hope to be able to have another webinar just like this very soon with you guys. So again, thanks to everyone who joined. Thanks so much for all the great questions. We really, really loved it. And so have a great rest of your evening and see you all very soon.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you.